Ava Simmons, a bright 12-year-old with sparkling eyes and a contagious smile, could hardly contain her excitement as she and her father prepared to board a flight bound for Atlanta. Today was special, she was finally going to visit her beloved grandma, and the prospect filled her with anticipation. Accompanying her on this journey was her dad, FBI agent Marcus Simmons, whose calm, reassuring presence always made her feel safe. The morning had been a whirlwind of activity. Ava had carefully packed her favorite plush toy and a small journal in which she had scribbled down all the things she hoped to do with her grandma, from baking cookies together to hearing stories of days gone by. Meanwhile, Marcus had meticulously confirmed their flight details and made sure every necessary document was in order. Although his work as an FBI agent usually meant long, stressful days, today he had set aside his professional burdens to focus on family time. As they navigated the busy airport corridors, the excited chatter of fellow travelers and the hum of rolling suitcases only added to the festive atmosphere. Ava's eyes lit up as she gazed out the large windows of the terminal, imagining the adventures that awaited her in Atlanta. Her heart beat with a mixture of childlike wonder and a newfound sense of independence. This was her first time flying, and every moment felt magical. Once on board, the duo settled into the Economy Plus section, a little oasis of extra legroom that Marcus had chosen for comfort after a particularly grueling week. Ava pressed her face against the small oval window, marveling at the rapidly receding city lights and the patchwork of fields below. In contrast, Marcus sat back and reviewed a few notes on his tablet, his professional mind quietly shifting between the flight's logistics and the memories of his own childhood journeys. Though the flight promised a period of quiet respite, Marcus couldn't help but feel a hint of apprehension. Past experiences had taught him that even the calmest trips might harbor unexpected challenges. He reassured himself that, with his daughter's joyful presence and his own steady determination, they were ready for whatever might come their way. In that quiet moment, as the plane ascended into a starlit sky, Ava's excitement and Marcus's careful vigilance mingled, a powerful reminder that every journey, no matter how routine it might seem, was filled with the promise of new experiences and the unbreakable bond between a father and his daughter. As the plane cruised at altitude, Ava Simmons was happily absorbed in gazing at the view outside her window when a disturbance along the aisle drew her attention. Marcus Simmons, seated a few rows behind, noticed a figure approaching their row. An elderly woman, later identified as Edith Maple, appeared, moving with a determined yet haughty air. Clad in a faded cardigan and carrying a small purse, Edith made her way down the narrow aisle until she stopped right beside Ava's seat. "Young lady, you must vacate this seat at once," Edith declared, her tone brusque and insistent. "This seat is far too uncomfortable for someone like me. I have a sensitive back, you know." Ava's eyes widened in confusion and a hint of fear. She clutched her favorite toy tighter, uncertain why an adult stranger would demand such a thing. At that moment, Marcus leaned forward slightly, his focus sharpening on the unfolding situation. "Ma'am," he said politely but firmly, "this is an assigned seat in our section. There's no need for you to claim it." Edith's expression grew stern. "I'm telling you, I have a condition, and these seats just aren't designed for my back. I demand that you let me sit here so I can travel comfortably," she insisted, her voice rising as she gestured emphatically. The growing commotion caught the attention of nearby passengers. Some looked on with sympathetic expressions for the elderly woman, while others exchanged skeptical glances, sensing an undercurrent of entitlement. Marcus maintained his calm, his tone measured yet unwavering. "I understand your discomfort, ma'am, but the seat assignment is clear, and my daughter is currently occupying this seat as part of our ticketed accommodation." Edith scoffed, "My dear, you wouldn't understand. I've been traveling for decades, and I know when something isn't right. This isn't just about comfort, it's about ensuring I get what I'm entitled to." Her tone carried a blend of impatience and self-importance that made it clear she believed her needs trumped any rules set by the airline. Marcus's eyes softened slightly as he looked toward Ava, who was now visibly trembling. He knew that this confrontation was more than just a dispute over a seat, it was an intrusion into the peaceful experience he had hoped to share with his daughter. "Ma'am, I respectfully request that you return to your assigned seat," he said firmly. If you have a genuine concern about your back, I suggest you notify the flight attendant so they can check on you properly. Despite Marcus's calm and respectful tone, Edith's frustration grew. I have every right to demand what I need, she retorted sharply. If you can't understand that, then you're making it impossible for a real person to travel in comfort. Her declaration sparked whispers among the passengers, some of whom had been silently watching the exchange. A few even recorded the moment on their phones. Marcus, sensing the situation was on the verge of escalating further, exchanged a quick, understanding look with a nearby flight attendant, Claire, who was already moving toward the area. As the murmur of discontent swelled in the aisle, Marcus's protective instincts for his daughter heightened. His mind raced with thoughts of how quickly a simple request had morphed into a public spectacle. Though he remained determined to uphold the seating arrangement and protect Ava's comfort, he couldn't ignore the underlying tension that hinted at deeper issues of entitlement and bias. The scene was set for a confrontation that would test not only the patience of those involved but also the values of respect and fairness that Marcus held dear. As Edith's demands grew louder, and as the cabin's atmosphere turned charged with anxiety and expectation, Marcus braced himself. He knew that this encounter might be just the beginning of a challenging journey, one that could affect the remainder of their flight and leave an indelible mark on his daughter's memory. Within minutes of Edith Maple's initial demand, the atmosphere in the cramped cabin began to shift from mere annoyance to palpable tension. The elderly woman's tone grew sharper, and her face flushed with indignation as she squared her shoulders and fixed her gaze on young Ava Simmons. "You're too large for this seat," Edith declared suddenly, her voice booming in the confined space. Her insult was not just a comment on physical appearance, it was an affront meant to belittle and demean. Ava, already shaken by the earlier request, began to cry softly. Her small hands clutched her favorite plush toy, and her wide eyes reflected a deep-seated fear. Passengers nearby exchanged shocked glances, murmuring among themselves about the cruelty of the remark. The situation had spiraled far beyond a simple seating dispute. Before long, the commotion caught the attention of Claire, a patient and experienced flight attendant. Stepping into the aisle with a calm yet assertive smile, Claire attempted to defuse the growing conflict. "Ma'am, please, let's try to keep the conversation respectful," she said, addressing Edith in a soothing tone. "I understand that you're uncomfortable, but there's no need to insult the other passengers." Edith's face hardened. "Respect? I demand respect. I've been traveling far longer than this brat, and I know my rights," she retorted, her voice rising again. "This seat must be adjusted immediately, or I will make sure everyone knows how this flight treats its customers." The tension escalated as Edith's harsh words reverberated down the aisle. Several passengers began to record the exchange on their smartphones, capturing the unfolding drama for posterity. Ava's soft cries filled the background, intensifying the discomfort. Marcus Simmons, watching from his seat, felt his protective instincts flare. He had always known that even a minor confrontation could spiral into something far more distressing, but he had never anticipated that his daughter would be directly targeted with such hurtful language. Unable to bear the barrage of insults any longer, Marcus rose from his seat. His voice, firm and resolute, cut through the clamor. "Ma'am, that language is completely unacceptable," he stated calmly yet firmly. "I will not allow my daughter to be insulted or harassed. This is our seat as designated by our ticket, and you have no right to interfere." His words drew a sudden hush over the surrounding passengers. For a moment, time seemed to slow as all eyes turned to witness the confrontation between a protective father and an irate stranger. Marcus's steady tone and unwavering gaze conveyed an unspoken warning: any further aggression would not be tolerated. Edith's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, she hesitated, caught off guard by the intensity in Marcus's voice. However, her pride soon flared, and she attempted to retort, "You're just overreacting. I'm not the one causing a disturbance here." Her words, however, lacked conviction, and the murmurs from the crowd began to tilt in favor of Marcus's measured response. Meanwhile, Claire, the flight attendant, moved closer to support Marcus. "Sir, ma'am, please," she interjected softly, "let's all remain calm. We're here to ensure everyone's safety and comfort." Her plea, combined with Marcus's firm stance, started to dampen the fire of the dispute. Marcus continued, "I understand that you have your own needs, but harassing a child is never acceptable. I ask you to please step back and let us enjoy our flight without further conflict." His words, laced with quiet determination, resonated with the nearby passengers, many of whom nodded in agreement. As the confrontation reached its peak, the air in the cabin became charged with unresolved emotion. The raw hurt in Ava's eyes and the determined firmness in Marcus's voice created a moment of intense gravity. Even as Edith tried to muster a comeback, her tone wavered under the collective disapproval of the onlookers. Marcus's clear boundary had shifted the balance. Though the confrontation was not yet fully resolved, his intervention had signaled that any further escalation would be met with decisive action. The once disruptive atmosphere began to ease, replaced by a cautious calm. But the scars of the exchange, the painful words and the visible distress on a young girl's face, would linger in the memories of all who witnessed it. With the dispute in full swing and the cabin charged with tension, Marcus Simmons realized that decisive action was needed to protect his daughter and restore order. Stepping firmly from his seat, he advanced toward Edith Maple, who was still vociferously demanding that the seat be changed. Her voice, laced with insults and indignation, had already disturbed the peace of the flight, and Marcus's protective instincts were at their peak. "Ma'am," Marcus said, his tone cool and authoritative, "I have explained that this seat is assigned to us as per our ticket. Your constant disruptions and hurtful language are not acceptable." He paused, letting his words sink in as the murmur of concerned passengers quieted around them. Edith, her face flushed with anger, retorted, "I demand that the seat be given to me. I have a sensitive back, and this arrangement is intolerable." Her voice, though loud and demanding, betrayed a note of desperation that hinted at something deeper, a need to be seen and heard, even if her methods were misguided. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he responded, "I understand your discomfort, but you have no right to harass my daughter. Our seating is determined by the airline, and I will not allow you to impose your demands on us." His words, firm and resolute, conveyed both the weight of his authority and the depth of his protective commitment. Around them, passengers listened in rapt silence. Some exchanged sympathetic glances with Marcus, while others appeared visibly uncomfortable with the heated exchange. The tension in the aisle was nearly tangible, the conflict a stark reminder of the fine line between personal comfort and public disruption. Seeing that verbal warnings alone might not suffice, Marcus took a step further. "I ask that you respect our space," he continued, "and if you continue to cause a disturbance, I will have no choice but to escalate this matter with the flight crew." His tone was calm, yet carried an unmistakable edge of finality. Edith's eyes flashed with defiance as she opened her mouth to reply, but before she could speak, the situation took another turn. In response to the escalating confrontation, a flight attendant, Claire, stepped forward once again, her presence a calming influence. "Ma'am, please, let's try to settle this matter peacefully," she said in a gentle but firm voice. "Your seat assignment is clearly indicated, and any change must be coordinated with the airline staff." Her words, combined with Marcus's stern declaration, seemed to momentarily unsettle Edith. She looked around, perhaps realizing that the support for Marcus was mounting among the passengers. The atmosphere grew heavy, each person acutely aware that this was no longer a simple disagreement. It was a clash of wills that threatened to overshadow the entire flight. Marcus, his heart heavy with concern for Ava's well-being, repeated his request one final time, "For the sake of everyone's comfort, especially my daughter's, I must insist that you cease all disruptive behavior. Your demands are unfounded, and if you persist, I will ensure that the proper authorities are notified." At that moment, the cabin's tension began to wane ever so slightly. Passengers who had been watching with bated breath now offered quiet nods of approval. Edith's defiant stance faltered, and her angry expression softened into one of reluctant resignation. Though she still wore a hardened look, it was clear that Marcus's unwavering tone had begun to break her resolve. In the ensuing moments, a sense of order slowly returned to the aisle. The flight attendants resumed their duties, and the general hum of the cabin came back as passengers attempted to settle back into their seats. Marcus returned to his seat with his daughter, his protective gaze never leaving her. He knew that while the immediate confrontation had been quelled, the scars of the encounter might linger, especially in a child's memory. For Marcus, this intervention was more than just about securing a seat. It was a matter of upholding dignity and ensuring that respect was maintained, even in the tight confines of an airplane cabin. His measured response had reasserted his authority, and although the confrontation had been emotionally draining, it served as a clear declaration that any further harassment would not be tolerated. As the plane continued on its journey, the memory of the confrontation slowly began to fade into a background hum. Yet Marcus remained vigilant, determined that his daughter's safety and dignity would be preserved, no matter the cost. As the tension in the cabin reached a boiling point, Marcus Simmons knew that more needed to be done to restore order and protect his daughter, Ava. With the situation teetering on the edge of further escalation, he reached into his jacket pocket and, with a measured yet resolute gesture, pulled out his FBI badge. The polished emblem caught the overhead lights, glinting clearly in view of the gathered passengers and, most importantly, of the irate elderly woman, Edith Maple. "Ma'am," Marcus stated calmly, holding his badge aloft, "I am an FBI agent, and I assure you that I stand by my daughter's right to occupy our assigned seat. Your accusations are baseless and will not be tolerated." His voice, firm and unyielding, carried an authority that was impossible to ignore. For a long, suspended moment, the cabin fell silent. The sight of the official badge shifted the dynamics instantly. Edith's previously brazen demeanor faltered. Her eyes widened in shock as the realization set in, this was no ordinary passenger. The officers on board and the nearby passengers, many of whom had been recording the incident, now exchanged looks of quiet approval and relief. Marcus continued, "I have every right to travel peacefully, and so does every passenger. If you continue to disrupt this flight with hateful and baseless remarks, I will be forced to take further action." His words resonated throughout the aisle, each syllable a measured promise of accountability. At that point, Edith's anger gave way to uncertainty. She hesitated, her earlier insults and demands falling silent in the face of undeniable authority. I didn't realize," she stammered, her voice trailing off as she looked around at the supportive faces of fellow passengers. It was clear that the tide had turned. Without missing a beat, Marcus lowered his badge and added in a calm but stern tone, "I strongly advise you to cease all harassment immediately. I assure you, any further actions against my daughter will be recorded and reported." His final warning was delivered with such clarity that it left no room for misunderstanding. The reaction in the cabin was immediate. Several passengers nodded in approval, while others whispered words of encouragement to Marcus. Ava, who had been trembling in her seat, now looked up at her father with wide, relieved eyes. In that charged moment, the power dynamic had shifted completely in favor of Marcus, and the hateful rhetoric that had filled the aisle was replaced by a stunned silence. Edith attempted a weak apology, barely audible amid the renewed calm. "I'm sorry," she mumbled, though it was evident that her apology was more out of necessity than genuine remorse. Marcus's steady gaze and the supportive murmurs from those around him made it clear that the time for further confrontation had passed. As the officers on board discreetly exchanged glances and made a note of the incident, Marcus gathered his composure and resumed his seat beside Ava. Though the flight had been marred by an intense and emotionally charged altercation, his decisive display of authority had effectively neutralized the threat. The atmosphere, while still tinged with the echoes of the earlier conflict, had begun to settle into a cautious calm. For the remainder of the flight, Marcus kept a watchful eye on the cabin, ensuring that no further disturbances occurred. The memory of the badge's glint and the force of his words had established a clear boundary, a promise that respect and decency would always be enforced, regardless of personal bias or unwarranted hostility. In that moment, Marcus Simmons knew that his actions had not only protected his daughter but had also sent a powerful message to everyone on board: hate and harassment, no matter how loudly they are shouted, will ultimately be met with unwavering authority and the full force of accountability. In the tense moments following his display of the FBI badge, Marcus Simmons realized that he needed to ensure there would be a clear record of the incident. With the entire exchange already being recorded by several passengers, he took a deep breath and addressed the situation one final time. Leaning slightly forward, he spoke in a low, measured tone that carried to the surrounding passengers, "I want to make it unequivocally clear, every word, every action in this aisle is being recorded. Any further harassment directed toward my daughter will be met with immediate legal action." His words resonated powerfully in the hushed cabin. The quiet hum of the airplane's engines provided a steady backdrop as Marcus continued, "I have already documented this encounter. Should you persist in any form of disruptive or hateful behavior, rest assured that I will not hesitate to have the authorities notified, and your actions will be held fully accountable." The firmness in his voice left no room for misinterpretation. Edith Maple, now standing a few paces away, appeared visibly unsettled. The defiance in her eyes began to fade as the reality of Marcus's warning sank in. She fidgeted nervously with the strap of her purse, her earlier bravado replaced by a palpable sense of apprehension. I didn't mean to cause any trouble," she mumbled, her voice lacking conviction. Marcus, maintaining his calm, nodded slightly and added, "Please, for the sake of maintaining order and ensuring a peaceful flight for everyone, I strongly advise you to cease any further disruptive actions." His words were simple, yet they carried the full weight of his authority and the implicit promise of consequences should she disobey. Nearby passengers, many of whom had been watching the confrontation unfold with bated breath, now nodded their approval. Some whispered to each other that the situation was finally under control. The flight attendant, Claire, who had earlier attempted to mediate the initial dispute, now approached with a look of relief. "Thank you, Agent Simmons," she said quietly, "for handling this so professionally." Her acknowledgement, though soft, underscored the seriousness with which the crew viewed the incident. Marcus took a brief moment to reassure his daughter, Ava, who sat quietly in her seat with wide eyes. He reached over and gave her a gentle squeeze of the hand, silently promising that everything would be all right. "We're almost through this," he murmured, more to himself than to her, before turning back to address the lingering tension in the aisle. The officers on board, who had been discreetly observing the exchange, made a few notes on their tablets. It was evident that Marcus's clear statement and recorded evidence had tilted the balance decisively in his favor. Edith's earlier angry posture had now dissolved into a defeated slump, her gaze dropping to the floor as if in submission. Marcus's measured declaration, coupled with the persistent recording of the incident, sent a stark message: harassment, especially when directed at a child, would not be tolerated under any circumstances. "I urge you to reflect on your actions," he stated, his tone even and unyielding. "Any further attempts at disruption will result in immediate action from the flight crew and law enforcement." For the remainder of the flight, the atmosphere gradually shifted to one of cautious calm. Passengers resumed their quiet conversations, and the earlier turmoil receded into the background. Marcus remained vigilant, periodically checking his phone to ensure that the recording continued uninterrupted. The recorded warning was not merely a protective measure, it was a testament to his commitment to uphold the dignity and safety of his daughter and to stand firm in the face of baseless hostility. As the plane cruised through the night, the incident became a defining moment for Marcus. His recorded warning had effectively neutralized the threat, establishing a clear boundary that would serve as a lasting reminder that no one was above accountability. And with that assurance, he settled back into his seat, resolute in the knowledge that his protective actions would be remembered long after the flight had ended. As the tension in the cabin slowly began to subside after Marcus's recorded warning, the disturbance had nonetheless attracted the attention of the flight crew. Moments later, the intercom crackled to life with a clear and authoritative voice. "This is Captain Ramirez speaking. I have been informed of a situation involving disruptive behavior in the cabin. I request that all passengers remain seated and calm as we work to restore order." The captain's announcement resonated through the cabin, adding a layer of official authority to the proceedings. At that moment, many passengers looked toward the front, curious about how the situation would be resolved. Marcus, still seated next to Ava, felt a brief surge of relief as the captain's intervention underscored that such behavior was taken seriously at the highest levels. The flight attendants gathered briefly near the area, their expressions a mix of concern and resolve. Claire, who had earlier tried to mediate, now joined a small group of attendants to speak privately with both Marcus and the remaining disruptive party, Edith Maple. "We appreciate your cooperation, Agent Simmons," Claire said quietly, "and we're here to ensure that everyone on board is treated with respect." Captain Ramirez then made another announcement. "For the safety and comfort of all passengers, any further instances of disruptive behavior or harassment will result in immediate action by the crew. We ask for your understanding and cooperation as we proceed." His measured tone lent an air of finality to the earlier warnings. As the cabin fell into a more subdued silence, Marcus took a moment to look at Ava, reassuring her with a gentle smile. He then addressed the remaining tension directly. "I appreciate everyone's patience. Let us all focus on having a safe, calm journey." His voice, still carrying the authority of an FBI agent, had now been bolstered by the clear backing of the flight's leadership. Nearby, Edith stood awkwardly, her earlier aggressive stance now replaced by a look of uncertain resignation. The captain's intervention, coupled with the supportive murmurs of fellow passengers, had clearly diminished her resolve. "I'm sorry," she muttered under her breath, barely audible over the low hum of the engines. In that moment, the cabin's atmosphere had shifted. The aggressive confrontation that had once threatened to disrupt the entire flight was now contained under a blanket of enforced calm. The flight attendants resumed their duties, and a sense of order gradually returned to the space. Marcus, though still vigilant, allowed himself a small sigh of relief. He knew that the captain's decisive action had sent a clear message: disrespect and hostility, especially in the face of protecting a child, would not be tolerated. The remaining minutes of the flight passed with minimal incident. Passengers returned to their conversations, and the earlier tension became a mere memory, though one that would linger in the minds of those who had witnessed it. Marcus kept a discreet watch on the aisle, ensuring that no further disruptions occurred. His protective stance, reinforced by the captain's intervention, had re-established the flight's order and set a standard of respect that resonated with everyone present. By the time the plane began its descent toward Los Angeles, the cabin was noticeably calmer. The collective sense of relief was palpable as passengers prepared for landing. Marcus, still seated next to a now quiet Ava, reflected on the events with a mixture of pride and sorrow. He was proud to have stood up for his daughter and to have maintained his dignity under pressure, yet he felt the weight of the incident and the pain it had caused his young child. Captain Ramirez's intervention had been a turning point, a moment when the authority of leadership and the power of a measured response quelled a volatile situation. As the plane touched down and passengers gathered their belongings, the memory of the confrontation served as a reminder that even in the confined space of an airplane, respect and decency must prevail. Marcus knew that this experience, though difficult, would ultimately strengthen his resolve and guide him in future challenges. Once the plane had landed and the passengers disembarked, a quieter yet reflective mood settled over the airport terminal. Marcus Simmons and his daughter Ava made their way through customs, their steps measured and their expressions thoughtful. The earlier incident had left an indelible mark, not only on those directly involved but also on the other passengers who had witnessed the confrontation. Outside the terminal, the cool evening air offered a brief reprieve. Ava clutched her father's hand, her eyes still reflecting the residue of fear, but now mixed with relief and a budding sense of security. "Daddy, will things like that ever happen again?" she asked in a small, hesitant voice. Marcus knelt down, meeting her gaze gently. "I promise, sweetheart, I will always protect you and stand up for what's right," he said softly, his tone full of both love and determination. Later that evening, in the privacy of their modest hotel room near the airport, Marcus sat at a small desk reviewing the detailed incident report he had filed with both the airline and local law enforcement. The report meticulously documented every moment. From the initial confrontation with the disruptive passenger, Edith Maple, to his own measured warnings and the captain's decisive intervention. Accompanying the written account were video clips and eyewitness statements collected by fellow passengers. Marcus's careful record-keeping was not only a means of ensuring accountability but also a way to process the emotional turmoil of the encounter. As he read through the report, Marcus reflected on the broader implications of the incident. It wasn't merely a dispute over a seat, it was a stark illustration of how prejudice and entitlement could disrupt the lives of innocent people. He recalled the hurtful words thrown at Ava and the unjust accusations that had been made, and he felt a renewed determination to ensure that such behavior was never tolerated again. In quiet moments, Marcus confided in Ava about the importance of standing up for oneself and for others. He explained that while some people might lash out of ignorance or prejudice, it was crucial to remain calm and let one's actions speak louder than their words. The world isn't always fair, he told her, but by holding on to our dignity and speaking the truth, we can make a difference. Ava listened intently, absorbing every word as if it were a precious lesson. The supportive response from fellow travelers and the commendations from the airline staff added another layer of solace. Several passengers had later approached Marcus on social media, expressing gratitude for his composed handling of the situation. Their messages were a reminder that even in the face of hostility, there were those who recognized and appreciated the strength it took to maintain one's integrity. As the night wore on, Marcus and Ava settled in for the evening. The conversation gradually shifted from the unsettling events of the flight to lighter topics, a favorite family recipe, a funny anecdote from Marcus's early career, and plans for exploring Atlanta with Grandma. Though the memory of the confrontation lingered, it was gradually replaced by a sense of healing. In that quiet, reflective aftermath, Marcus knew that the incident would be a part of their story, but not its defining chapter. It was a painful reminder of the work still needed to combat prejudice, yet it was also a testament to the power of resilience and the strength of a father's love. As Marcus tucked Ava into bed that night, he felt a deep sense of resolve. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he vowed to continue protecting her and standing up for justice, confident that even in the darkest moments, truth and decency would ultimately prevail. Later that evening, after the adrenaline of the flight had finally subsided, Marcus Simmons gathered his daughter Ava close in the quiet of their hotel room. Determined to help her recover from the unsettling ordeal, he decided to share stories that had long been a part of his own journey. Sitting on a plush armchair beside her bed, he began recounting humorous, light-hearted anecdotes from his early days on the job, tales of unexpected mishaps during training exercises and moments when even the most high-stakes operations ended with laughter. "Do you remember the time I got locked out of the van on a snowstorm?" Marcus chuckled, his voice warm and reassuring. Ava's tearful expression slowly gave way to tentative smiles as she listened intently. The gentle cadence of his storytelling filled the room with a sense of calm, gradually pushing away the bitter memories of the flight. Marcus explained how, even in the face of adversity, maintaining a sense of humor and a positive outlook had helped him overcome challenges. "Every tough day teaches you something," he said softly, "and sometimes, it's those very challenges that make you stronger." His words were not just meant to entertain, they were a reminder that resilience was built through experiences, both painful and uplifting. Ava listened, her eyes shining with a mixture of wonder and growing confidence. As Marcus recounted a particularly amusing story about a miscommunication during a high-security operation, she giggled quietly, the sound a welcome contrast to the earlier tension. In that moment, the room seemed to glow with hope and reassurance. Their conversation soon shifted to lighter topics, discussing her plans for a fun day with her grandmother, favorite cartoons, and the little joys of everyday life. Marcus's gentle humor and the warmth in his voice created a safe space for Ava to express herself, turning the traumatic events of the flight into lessons of perseverance and the importance of family support. For Marcus, these moments of bonding were a reminder of why he carried the weight of his responsibilities. The pain of the earlier confrontation had been real, but so had the strength that came from love and compassion. He wanted Ava to know that no matter how harsh the world might sometimes seem, there was always a haven in the love of family and the courage to face challenges head-on. As the night deepened, and the soft hum of the city outside provided a gentle lullaby, Ava finally drifted off to sleep. Her small hand rested on Marcus's arm, a silent testament to the security and comfort she felt in his presence. For Marcus, that simple moment encapsulated the triumph of resilience, a reminder that even when faced with prejudice and hostility, the power of kindness and understanding could mend even the deepest of wounds. Upon arriving in Atlanta, as the plane taxied toward the gate, Ava Simmons gazed out the window at the sprawling city below with a thoughtful expression. The tumultuous events of the flight, the hostile words, the courageous stand of her father, and the eventual restoration of peace, swirled in her mind. Though the experience had been frightening, it had also taught her a powerful lesson about justice and standing up for oneself. As Marcus Simmons led Ava through the busy airport terminal, he listened attentively as she quietly reflected on what had transpired. "Daddy," Ava said softly, "I learned today that even when people say horrible things, justice can still prevail. I want to be brave like you, so I can help others too." Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of a promise, a vow to stand up against injustice, no matter how overwhelming it might seem. Marcus smiled gently, his heart swelling with pride and reassurance. "That's right, sweetheart. Even in a world where people can be unkind, the truth and our actions matter the most," he replied. "I've always believed that when you stand by what is right, you help make the world a better place." As they made their way to a waiting car, the neon glow of the Atlanta skyline provided a backdrop to their quiet conversation. Marcus recounted bits of the day's events with a measured tone, emphasizing the importance of staying calm and focused when faced with adversity. He explained that while the encounter had been deeply unsettling, it was also a reminder that integrity and justice must always prevail over hatred and prejudice. Ava listened intently, absorbing every word. In that reflective moment, she realized that her father's actions were not just about protecting her on that flight, they were about setting an example for everyone, demonstrating that even in the face of aggression, one could respond with dignity and strength. As the car pulled away from the terminal, Ava gazed out at the city lights, her thoughts filled with a quiet determination. "I promise, Daddy," she said softly, "I'll always stand up for what's right, just like you do." Marcus reached over and squeezed her hand gently. "I know you will, Ava. Remember, no matter where you are or what challenges you face, your voice and your courage can make a difference." In that final stretch of their journey, as Atlanta's vibrant energy embraced them, Ava's reflection became a beacon of hope. Despite the prejudice and hostility they had encountered, she recognized that justice, truth, and the strength of one's character could light the way toward a brighter, more equitable future. And with that resolve firmly planted in her heart, Ava Simmons stepped into the city, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, confident that she, like her father, would always stand up for herself and for those who needed her strength.